Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Matt Topper, president of Uber Ether. Thanks for joining us for the CDM panel at this year's FedID Forum. With me, I've got James Saunders, the CISO of the Small Business Administration, Rob Hankinson, Director of Information Technology Infrastructure for the Department of State, and Ross Ford, Senior Engineer with CISA's CDM program. So today, we'll be talking about some of the history with CDM, how it's changed the identity and access management world across the federal government with the 60+ agencies that it addresses. I will be monitoring the Slack channel, which for this session is Wednesday session block A as in Apple. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in there and I will pick them up as we go along. So I guess with that, if everybody is ready to rock and roll, CDM, it's hard to believe. It's been 8 years at this point, right? It seems like, I don't know, it seems like just yesterday, but at the same time, it seems like it's been a couple decades. Maybe that's just the world of 2020 we're living in, where everything seems a little bit longer. But in the last 8 years, what has been CDM's biggest impact on your agency? Feel free to jump, whoever.
I'll go ahead and start us out then. So CDM has been huge for our agency across the different phases and across the different ways that it can be implemented and leveraged and used. In particular, in my area, we use the CDM task orders to make purchases of software that was greatly discounted compared to what we would get on the street. So that was huge. That helped us get the ball rolling a lot quicker, sooner, faster, cheaper than we would have been able to do on our own. So leveraging a larger buying power was incredible for us. They also provided quite a bit of expert knowledge coming into this, right? We were starting pretty much flat-footed, not knowing what CDM was or what we were trying to do. We were just trying to keep the lights on an incredibly large organization. Try to keep things secure and try to do reporting as best as we could and meet the mandates and do all these things that we're required to do. And CDM came in and really made that a lot easier for us. There were some growing pains. We didn't understand what the effort was. We didn't understand how we were going to meet it. We didn't understand how we could leverage it. We had a lot of tools that were already in place. And we weren't sure whether we had to stop using those tools and then start using these or use both at the same time. But we're past that now. And hindsight is 2020. But it has been a pretty smooth transition to get to where we want to go. And I think we're much better for it. So yeah, cheaper and faster and provides so much more expert knowledge than we would be able to pull on our own.
Yeah, I'll jump in from there. From SBA perspective, only been around for 3 years, so I can't give you the full 8 years of experience. But over the last couple of years, from my perspective, CDM has really done a couple of things. First and foremost, it really allowed SBA and DHS to form a much tighter partnership than what I can kind of sense from data that we had before. So we're much more integrated. We talk more often than not. So that was a huge benefit there, even beyond CDM. CDM specifically, one of the biggest takeaways I get from it is that it really, along with FISMA and NIST, gives us a baseline requirement for what security needs to look like. So we know what's on the network. That's asset management. It ties to NIST 837. It brings all that together, but it also does it in a way that my technical staff can understand, in a way that my compliance and policy staff can understand. We have a common language, and that's how do we achieve CDM across the board. So those were the two biggest takeaways for us. It really enabled us to partner better with DHS and allowed us to have a baseline ability to have a conversation around security technology and requirements.
And Matt, I think from a CDM perspective, that partnership with these agencies, particularly the two guys who were talking on the phone, first of all, with Rob's organization, a lot of the things you were doing were taken into house at CDM, so we understand, take the benefit of what you had been doing for a long time, and then for James, your organization has made a move to the cloud, and so CDM is is learning from the experiences there. So I'd say we really are operating in a real partnership manner right now, which is really was the intention to do. And it's hard to get the entire federal civilian government moving as a partnership, but I think we're really pleased with that right now. We think we add good benefit everywhere we touch, and the partnerships are the key part to that.
Yeah, I have to say, from an outside vendor perspective, right? The amount of discussions going on between the agencies, especially in the last 3 years, has been amazing, right? I personally have seen a ton of progress, just with best practices getting repeated over and over again. So yeah, it's been awesome. But so next big question. So going into 2020, Kevin Cox called 2020 the readiness year for CDM. And now that we're, oh my goodness, almost well over halfway through it, it seems like COVID changed that a little bit and made it the, I'll call it OS year in many cases. So with the last 7 years of CDM and all of the setup, how did it help enable your agencies through these rapid changes that happened? And I guess with that, what other things did you see this year that you haven't seen in past years, if anything?
I'll jump in there. For us, more specifically to the partnership and pilots we've done with DHS between TIC and CDM, all that work we did to build those pilots up were perfect for what we needed to do for COVID. For example, a lot of work around the TIC pilot we've done in the past, which was to enable us to do cloud-based technologies, that came into play. So when the OPM stated, hey, or OBM, sorry, stated, hey, we're working from home for a foreseeable future, we were already telework enabled. There was nothing really new for us to do. From a CDM perspective, when the new systems that came up to support, the PPP and CARES Act, we already had a game plan exactly what needed to be in place, how it's going to connect back to the CDM infrastructure, how it connects back to our different requirements. And it was not much of a discussion. It was already baked into the requirements. So that's one of the biggest things we got out of the CDM and our partnership with DHS, is that the baseline was already there. It wasn't new. So in short, that's the biggest takeaway I can state for that.
So unlike James, the Department of State was not there. Our culture was not a telework culture. We largely worked in the offices. We came into the office. I don't remember the statistics, but any given day, about 2% of our employees would telework. The biggest time we would see anybody teleworking is that when there was a big snowstorm or something like that. We just didn't have the culture. A lot of our systems are classified systems, so you can't do that off-prem, or you really couldn't at the time. But with COVID coming up, we had to find a way to quickly transition 100,000 plus users globally to allow them for remote access. And something that I'm pretty proud of is that we did it as an organization in less than a month. We also had a lot of the same baseline pieces, parts in place. They just weren't at the level that we ever wanted to use them or ever thought that we'd use them at. We didn't have the licenses. We needed more firewalls. We needed more perimeter devices so that remote users can connect in. We needed laptops. We needed web cameras. We needed headsets. We needed all these things. We needed classified systems that were remote access. We didn't have any of these things, or we had them in smaller degrees. We had some applications that were in the cloud. But the good thing is because of the CDM program, we had a fantastic identity management system that all of our users were already rolled in, and that took so much of the pain away from it. And I'm sure everybody can agree that the toughest part with our job is dealing with a customer and training with them and making sure that they're ready to go and that they understand and they have what they need to do their job. Because when COVID kicked off, nobody was coming into the office to do what they needed to do. It was either you do it at home or it doesn't get done. So having an identity system that the user was already enrolled in, then we just had to worry about getting more applications rolled in, more of those cloud applications rolled in, getting that infrastructure built up. And the system that we had in place that we purchased through the CDM program is an industry leader, and it's well known for the speed that you can roll in applications and how many connections that already exist and how fast we can do it. And we were really doing good at pulling in these different applications so that way users could already use the credentials that they had to authenticate to them and identify without increasing risk or without adding any more issues on our side of the house. So I would say the priorities changed for us. We scaled up and we ramped up really quickly. And now we're all working offline, business as usual, and we've done surveys, and most users are able to do everything they need to do at home that they can do in the office. It's fantastic.
That's amazing.
You know, Matt, from CDM's perspective, the readiness year that Kevin talked about, it really encompassed three different things. In the defend task order, we knew we had to be more able to react faster to needs of the agencies, and the contract structure was built for that. We also expanded the approved products list. We made a big move to get the tools on the approved products list, even if CDM didn't anticipate we were going to need them for CDM's purposes, but to meet the agency's need, and that helped in this time. And then the two other things that we foundationally already knew we needed to do in this year were data quality efforts to make sure that the tools and sensors report the data accurately up to the dashboard, and then finally the dashboard. We knew that we had to modernize the dashboard, and that's going forward. All the integrators are working really closely with us to modernize the dashboard infrastructure that we have, and the agencies have been participating in helping us know what that dashboard should look like so that they can get the most benefit out of it. So it's been a lot of agencies have had to come to us and ask for help, and we've been there to help them, and we could because of this the defend structure. It makes it able for us to provide resources, both human resources and technical tools resources when they're needed.
That all of the defend contracts falling when they did and being lined up couldn't have hit at a better time, I think, for everybody on the phone. Right, it's kind of the green light to, right, if the agency has the money to actually go after this, the green light to push that gas pedal and get everything moving at much faster speeds than I've been able to see in the past, right? So Rob, I do know you worked heavily on the M1917 work, and it's just been over a year since it's been released. What's been the impact of M1917 on your agencies and the CDM program as well, and how those are helping to come together, I guess is the best way to put it.
So M1917 really, I believe, breathed life into FIPS 201 and HSPD 12. I have a PKI background, run the FIPS system here at the Department of State, one of my programs. So I love the program. I think it's fantastic. We don't have a credential that's stronger. I don't know what's out there that could be stronger than the PIV card. So I love HSPD 12 and I love FIPS 201. However, industry and technology was moving away to where that technology really wasn't going to be usable going forward. It was hard to use it on like a sled and on your mobile phone and in remote applications. 800-157 came out, the derived credentials came out, and it helped out a little bit, right? We've got derived credentials here at the Department of State, but the application and use of them is still kind of limited. 1917 really reinforced all of that, and it provided enablers to a lot of other technologies that are out there that can be just as strong as the PIV or very close to it, at least to meet the risk level that you need for your network if you're following 863. But it really turned something that I believe HSPD 12 and FIPS 201 are very it's a recipe. Do this, do that, do this in this exact way. You have to do it like this. And there you go. Whether or not it makes sense for your organization or not, you have to do it in these sort of ways, or else you can't call it a PIV card, and then you can't get credit for it. And so you just got to do it. The 1917 came out, and it really changed that around to where you could use it where it made sense, But then there's all these other technologies out there that you could start playing with and checking out, YubiKeys and things like that, that the industry is using every day, banking is using. So they're well trusted and they're great solutions. So looking at that, it allowed us ways to get away from passwords and things like that that we know are just not good for us. But we didn't have a way that we could move forward that was allowed by policy, and M1917 really enabled that for us.
Are you doing any pilots for alternative authenticators other than the PIV and CAC today?
We are. We've got a couple. I mentioned YubiKey, so we're playing around with that. We're stepping our toes into how to leverage Duo, and we've got some other industry partners that we're working with pretty closely. Nothing ready for prime time, but there's certainly a lot of potential there for us to use it. And if we were able to get through COVID without having to go to it, I think we've got a little bit of time now, and we can really flesh these out and make sure that they're the right thing for the department.
Very nice. James, have you had any impacts with M1917 with SBA?
For us, yes. For the most part, right now we're kind of working on the foundational aspects, getting the IAM in order. Right now, different pieces are done in different areas, so we're trying to bring it all together under the IAM banner. However, from looking at it from a conversation that Rob's having, we do have it in place because we needed to. Our PIV offices actually did shut down for a period of time over the pandemic. So we had to figure out how do we allow people to work, PIV cards were expiring, new people need to come on board. So the requirement that was set, no single factor authentication anywhere at any time. So we moved towards, leveraging our cloud-based, identity structure to do, what is called a conditional access. If you're on a trusted network with a trusted device, okay, you can go username and password. However, if you're not on a trusted network or with a trusted device, you now need multi-factor authentication, and what type changes based off the risk conditions kind of picked up therefore by the system. So we were able to put that in place and meet the same level of security requirements and rigor without requiring that PIV card. Now, once the pandemic lifts and we get back to, a steady state, we're going to take a really good look to see which part of that stays around and which part goes back to PIV cards. But for the most part, it works. There's the business and the mission is able to continue. We're able to still serve the American people. So how can I leverage that policy to say, hey, let's shift away from PIV cards into something a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more modern, and that's where that conversation is going to need to go over the next couple months to a year.
That's awesome. Can we just pause and let everybody listen to that again? The CISO of the Small Business Administration said it works, and you don't have to do PIV for everything. I think if we just take that and resound it across the government, right? PIV's got its place, but right, like the fact that you can do risk-based access control, and you all have taken that security first mindset and figured out here's the things that are risky, here's the things that are we have to have PIV on, here's the things that a username and password and a simple MFA, whether that's, gosh forbid, I'm sure there might be some SMS pushes going on, right? And we all saw the 863 SMS is bad, but right, it works, right? And you just got to figure out what's best for your agency. So that's fantastic. Ross, I'm sure you.
Yeah, the biggest, the most immediate benefit I had from M1917 was it told agencies to take an enterprise approach to their ICAM services, and it actually gives a good description of who are the players that have to play in that arena, and it's a pretty broad set of players that have to play, and that was really beneficial to the message that I had already been, we'd already been getting to agencies. That this is the best way to do ICAM is an enterprise approach. Secondly, it led me in specifying that we need to take a life cycle approach, because really, as you look at identity management over time, it is a life cycle approach you have to have, and we're going to have to be much more intimate in knowing what users and what they're supposed to do based on the job they have, the role they have in the future, right? So that's a great thing, and the tools that we have will support that, and I was really pleased with that. I do have some modernization I have to do around my data model because I have not implemented the IAL, AAL, FAL components in the data model, but I have a plan to do that. And that is in regards to the mobile space. When we start doing that, that's where the need arises most acutely. Of course, cloud too, but I'll talk a little bit more later about how we're taking this progressive approach through mobile and then into cloud.
That's great. Yeah, I know all of us consumers of the MER will be happy to see some new attributes come in for doing role-based access control, some of the additional devices, and making that part of the access lifecycle management of all of our agencies. So,
and we're working on that right now with our FRDC partners. Yes,
that's awesome. I hope we can see that as a draft as well. So I guess along those lines, right? It's been a busy year for identity and access management. And NIST just finalized their ZeroTrust guidance, which is really a great blueprint for organizations to start thinking, right, about, as I said, a security first, a identity risk-based mindset to accessing all of our data within these agencies. Rob, I know your organization has been heading up a major ZeroTrust initiative and adding to the complexity of that, a highly distributed global ZeroTrust model with that, which I'm sure adds its own sets of complexities. So can you talk about what your team's been doing and some of the challenges you've had to overcome?
Yeah, this has been an organization-wide sort of effort, not just my organization, but we've really leveraged a lot of pieces and parts throughout the department to make this more of a reality and to really understand what it means for the Department of State. Right, 800-207 came out, but parts of our organization have been really dealing in that arena for a really long time. We've already spoke with industry, Microsofts and SAIC and people in industries that are already doing their own version of ZeroTrust. But just like with CDM, we didn't really know how it could be best configured and used in the Department of State. So the Department of State, I'm sure you guys all understand, we've got 277 embassies and consulates around the world, all with their own infrastructure and their backbone that has to come back to the United States and go through one of the domestic ticks. If you want to go to the internet, if you want to go to cloud, that's a huge draw on bandwidth. That's an incredible cost. It's really expensive. So part of a larger effort, a whole smart infrastructure effort that we've got going on is the testing out and seeing what ZeroTrust could do for us. We've got a couple different posts under this effort. Wi-Fi is part of it as well. And we're taking a couple different technologies, and I wouldn't really say doing a bake-off, but really digging into seeing how they can be used. Through this process, we found that we owned already most of the equipment and the technologies that we needed to make this a reality. The difference was how it was configured, where they were positioned, how they were used, and the culture and the mindset around that. So security for the Department of State was largely a castle and moat sort of thing, big high walls that everything sits on the inside. And I'm sure you're going to hear the big crunchy center a million times throughout this expo, but that's exactly how we looked, and I'm sure many organizations looked exactly the same way. So how do we move that defense around the identities? I think we already had that. We had that piece in place. We had it for a long time, thankfully to the CDM program. But how do we move the defenses around the data? And Ross talked about the different 863 levels in the FAL, the AAL, and the IAL. How are we going to move that and protect around the data? So those policies had to be written and put in place, and then the technologies applied to it. The TIC documentation that just came out, we took that and we linked that documentation with the controls through the cybersecurity risk framework all the way to the 863 controls, and then map those to the tools that we had now. see what did we have to buy, what did we have to put in place, and we saw the gaps that existed. And like I said, most of them are not technology gaps. They were policy gaps or configuration gaps. And through changing and moving things around, it got us a lot closer to, I'm going to call it a zero trust like solution. We're not completely there yet. We've still got a little bit of work to do, but there's a lot of promise there. And I think we could be there pretty quick and pretty soon. And we've got to get there because I think a previous panel mentioned that there's not any more money coming in, and budgets aren't just, they're not expanding. So our bandwidth continually goes up every year. So how are we going to get rid of that? Well, using zero trust and reducing our bandwidth and moving the protections closer to the identity and the data is really how we're going to get there.
That's awesome, Rob. Can I put you on the spot for a minute? Is that something you can share with your peers, that entire end-to-end mapping across the government? Because to me, that's like a completely awesome resource, right? That someone can take that entire mapping end-to-end and go, wow, right? We can cover all of our bases, right? They might have different tools, they might have different capabilities, but that would be awesome if you could make that available for people to share.
Yeah, no problem. I'm sure you can get with me later and tell me where I can post that. But yeah, it's all documentation that we pulled from public documents and the NIST documents and the DHS documents, and just made them all line up and talked to our vendors and said, okay, how can you meet these controls? And they did it. And one of them did it through technologies that we already owned and we already paid for. So it cost us no extra money.
Yeah, that's
Now we're just testing it. So I will caveat that to say that that's what they say. Now we're testing that.
Right.
We hope they're right.
So Ross, right, obviously, I know you've been very focused on zero trust, both personally and professionally, from some of the discussions we've had in the past. How do you envision CDM or other government programs helping agencies make this shift with M1917 and all the other factors in the world, right? Buzzword bingo, but right, we know this is going to be a 10+ year journey. So how do you see this CDM program shifting, or additional things that might be happening to help agencies get there faster?
Yeah, I'll say that I'm really happy to be at CISA, because CISA is taking a combined approach. There's different parts in CISA that can do different things, and our CTO office, Sean Connolly there, he actually is one of the prime authors on the 800-207, and the TIC modernization falls right into that. And you really need to lead with these concepts about, okay, if we are going to get away from this trusted walls approach, what do we do about our networking? How can that look? And they're really leading on that conversation with TIC 3.0, and there'll be more to come from that. It's not a done deal, right? There's use cases that have to be implemented, and there'll be more coming from that team. Immediately after we started hearing, I think it was 2018, I guess, was the big year when all the vendors started coining the zero trust. Kevin Cox had joined CDM, and we had an early conversation about what that means to CDM. I'll say that we were really confident that CDM was going to be a strong player in it, that it wasn't something that, it played right into our game plan. If you look at the phases of CDM, asset management, user management, operationalize and modernize, and then data protection, that's kind of the way you have to look at, because it's a data protection approach that ultimately you want to take, and how you manage those data assets or those resources appropriately, and who gets access to them. So when 207 came out, and we looked at the tenets, the 7 tenets of zero trust, and we mapped them to CDM's capabilities, and we have a contribution. I'm not going to say we cover it, because that's not the intent, but CDM has a contribution in all of the 7 tenets, and we feel really confident that we're going to be able to help agencies get to where they need to be, that CDM will be able to help with that journey. And it's a dynamic risk decision model that we end up with in the end. And CDM will be able to help with that already if you look at the architecture they drew, CDM is like one of the boxes in that architecture, but we actually will play in many other areas because, ICAM is in there and databases are in there, and that's all going to be part of where CDM goes in our journey to help agencies reduce their risk and improve their risk posture.
Yeah. Ross, is there anything going on? I know we've had some discussions lately on being able to provide real-time risk or, right, a lot of the SIM technologies that are in CDM today are, right, collect the logs, look at them, push them up to a dashboard. Is there anything going on that's allowing agencies to see that risk in more real time and actually push them onto the authentication authorization? Call them proxies, call them gateways, whatever you want, right? It's the same old technology, just new terms 10 years later. But anyways, anything going on in that realm lately?
So nothing that we're doing as CDM as a whole. Agencies, and we had begun some pilots to help agencies accomplish the zero trust, but COVID really kind of put focuses other places, and I expect, as we become more normal, agencies will reach out to us. Look, agencies are always open to reach out to CDM if they have an initiative or they need to do something, and we'll respond as best we can. It's sometimes budgetings are constraining and everything, but we try to respond to urgent needs, particularly if it's in an agency's major risk programs that we'll respond to. But I would say not yet. CDM has it has some time lag in its reporting right now. It has a 72-hour horizon for reporting up to the dashboard, and agencies are currently having some challenges even meeting that deadline with the amount of data that we need to collect. I'm sure that's going to improve over time, particularly as we change the model of the dashboard. But I think over time we'll become more risk adaptive. But right now, there's not any real major focus on reducing that time to delivery model yet.
I mean, I'd be real happy if we could catch all adversaries within 72 hours, right?
Oh, and there are initiatives, and I'll say there's other initiatives within CISA that work to look at more real-time information, and CDM is moving to get better visibility into what is happening now on the network. But just in the dashboard, and that basic model is a 72-hour concurrency model.
Okay. Is there anything you two are doing in your agencies to focus more on the real-time risk side? I know, James, you mentioned some of the contextual-based authentication authorization type stuff.
So for SBA, I love to harp on this, but a cloud-based CDM approach, we bring in all that data in real time. We see it all. It's pulling from on-prem systems, it's pulling from cloud systems. We're getting legacy systems in there. So we see all that data, we fuse it together. Now, where I really want to get to is a point where we can actually do some really good risk-based scoring, I guess, especially against identities, not only SBAs, staff, contractors, and federal staff, but also for the small businesses to assess that risk coming from outside as well. So that's something that we're kind of toying around with in context of what we want to do with TIC 3.0, what we want to do with our zero trust plans, and what we want to do, with CDM, our future state when we move to Elastic. So how do we bring in all that data, get it to Ross so that Ross can use it? And Ross, I just want to note, your team over there with Zero Trust is amazing. I talk to them all the time, and they really inform what we're doing here at SBA. So your message is spreading. But
oh yeah,
that's what
Kevin
we're trying
Kevin
to do.
Wortman is huge. Kevin Wortman is huge. He's our cloud engineer, and I'll tell you what, he's been working really closely with SBA and the TIC team. Sean, it's really great partners to watch.
Yep. So that's where we're at overall with it. It's taking all the lessons learned from everything we did with DHS, making it reality. Take concepts that Rob and State has done, merge it all together and make a really solid product that hopefully can span to the rest of the federal agencies. There's no point in all of us rewritten multiple wills when I can just borrow State Department's will and use that instead.
And Matt, Jim's mentioned the key thing that we have to have in place. It's a more responsive dashboard and better ability to aggregate information. And those are the things that I'll be able to answer your question positively when we start getting those things in place,
Yep. Yeah, from the outside, a lot of organizations don't realize the amount of work it is just to get the data right? And we've talked many times, Ross, that you could have the best systems in the world, but if your data is garbage, the system's garbage. So, so it is years and years and years of effort to get those data processes, get those policies correct, building in all the controls when the bad data shows up, when that flat file shows up overnight and magically that column of data disappeared, right?
Right.
And it never happened in the last 5 years, but it happened last night. So yeah, it's always fun. So so James, you've touched on it a bunch, right? Your agency's done a ton of work of taking CDM and turning it into really a cloud-first architecture, right? And taking a lot of the things and looking at them in different ways and going, we don't have an IP address, we don't have a MAC address, we've got ARNs now and different unique identifiers, and did a ton of work around non-person entities, governance of servers and services, and just completed a big cloud pilot with the CDM team. Can you talk about your journey, how you connected the dots with the cloud services, and really how that's changing and has become, I won't even say becoming anymore, become the blueprint for agencies as they move to the cloud and support CDM at the same time?
Yeah, certainly. So there's a little brief history I'm going to hit there really quick. 2017, SBA made a big jump into the cloud. 2018, we partnered with DHS and OMB to do a cloud tick pilot. All that learning we did led to 2019 when it was like, hey, let's try CDM in the cloud. So early on, it was, how do we take CDM and map it directly to our cloud CSPs? But the more you look at it, maybe take a step back. It doesn't work one-on-one. Technical violence 1-2 and logical data model just doesn't fit with the cloud one-to-one, and that's okay. So instead of trying to force that, it's what's the intent of CDM? The question was formerly known as phase one, what's on your network, is already answered by your cloud providers. And the reason for that, because these cloud providers technically have to do CDM on their own to manage all their customers. So the real challenge then becomes, how do I extract that data from out of their different APIs and gates and so on and so forth, and bring it to a common platform and then fuse it together with your on-premise data? So early on, to just focus on that what's on your network piece, yes, there's the ARNs. We know about that, and every device, every identity, every single thing you do in the cloud has some type of identifier associated with it. Let's bring that in. Let's normalize it. Let's map it against other data sets. Now the data is normalized. All right, now let's use the data. That's when you start walking down to other areas. All right, I know that this server exists for XYZ reason, but this identity, this user who is some system developer in some office who should not have access to this server is trying to access it. All right, I now know my security tools are flagging off. This is all theoretical, by the way. The security tools are firing off saying, hey, there's something going on with this user's account. All three of that fused together flows right into your security operations. Now you can respond to it. So that's kind of the thoughts we had in mind when we were building out threat models and looking at transferring and rebuilding the logical data model into a way that we can apply to the cloud. So to summarize it in short, it's the cloud providers have to do a form of CDM for themselves. There's no way around it. Otherwise, all kind of stuff will happen inside these different cloud providers otherwise. But it was tapping into those APIs, working closely with the CSPs, working closely with DHS to get understanding what's the intent, what's the requirements, and how do we transfer this over so that we can produce the product that we built that I now know is kind of influencing what Ross is doing and what Elastic is doing and what we want to do in the future. So that's the more or less how we connected the dots there. It's the data's there, map it, use it.
That's awesome. So Ross, right along these same lines, some of the biggest talking points, I won't say the biggest, there's a ton of them around CDM right now, is to keep pace with the cloud initiatives, the MDM initiatives, right? I think in the last 6 months, we all had problems even just getting laptops for people working at home, right? And the supply chain was exhausted, right? Especially once you start adding all of the parents trying to get laptops for their kids to work from home as well. We just tried getting my daughter a new Chromebook and went maybe in October if we're lucky. So what are some of the emerging ways you're seeing agencies deal with these new threats this year and going forward? And how's CDM going to help, right, with all these cloud and MDM initiatives? And bring your own device initiatives on top of it.
CDM has taken a progressive approach. We're trying to finish up the on-premise CDM model. As everybody knows, that's what the data quality activities are all about. And we're going to move the ecosystem into mobile next. And we'll do it the same way we did CDM on premise. We'll look at the devices first. Asset management is your foundation. If you don't know what devices you have, you can't manage anything. And then right after that, we'll start managing users. And I mentioned a little bit that, that's where I'll introduce the different, I'll break down LOA into IAL, AAL, FAL, because you have to do that on the mobile devices. It's appropriate for that. After that actually leaves us really well, and the lessons learned from the cloud to managing in the cloud. And I got to say, some agencies are already moving to the cloud pretty fast. SBA is not the only one, and CDM is helping meet them where they are. But I think when CDM builds those capabilities into our core, the cloud capabilities, that'll be subsequent to our move to mobile. So it's kind of a progressive move we're making, and I think in the end, we talked earlier about ZeroTrust, right? And the world's evolving to just a more risk adaptive approach to access control. And that'll be at the core of all the things we do over time, and particularly as we get to the cloud, because you have to take a risk adaptive approach when you're operating in the cloud. You can't rely on some perimeter that it is not your perimeter. It's a cloud. It's a shared environment, and you have to take those risk-based approaches. And CDM will be there as fast as we can. I mean, I do want to say we really push agencies hard to move at CDM's pace, and they have responded well. They're building up the resources. Agencies are building the resources to help CDM be successful in their organizations. And it's not easy. Some agencies were really not in a very strong position coming in, and they've had to build their core service capabilities around their human resources in order to enable the technology resources. And that'll continue to be a challenge for some agencies as we do advance to other ecosystems and other models. The last thing I want to say about mobile is I was asked a month or so ago to be a co-lead on the Derived PIV working group. So I think that'll help as CDM is building. It's a natural thing. As CDM is building these requirements for mobility, having the Derived PIV working group, which will look not only at Derived PIV, but alternate authenticators into mobile space. That'll be a great place for me to bring back to CDM the knowledge that we have about how agencies who are being successful with this, and how we'll bring that into CDM so that CDM provides the value to the agencies in its approach to the way we measure mobile identity.
That's awesome. I didn't know you were on the Drive working group,
Yeah,
so that's
just happened, and you're the first place I talked to it in a public space, so it's great.
all right. Yeah, that's awesome. So we've got permission to go over a little bit here, but coming up on the 11:30 time mark. So I think we got about 2 questions left. If anyone has anything they want to ask the panel, please feel free to throw it into that Wednesday session block A Slack channel. But so we've talked a lot about in-depth real-time topics right now. Let's take a look at the future a little bit. And what is your current top identity challenge within each of your agencies? And we'll just run across the panel. And then what do you predict in the next 5 to 10 years, which, right, we're hopefully going to have flying cars by then and the Jetsons will become real. But what do you predict is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years within your agency, across the federal government, around identity and access management? So James, I'll start with you on my left to right, which is probably not everyone else's left to right, but
Yeah, on my screen, I'm in the middle. I think the biggest challenge for SB in the identity space is, consolidating everything under one banner. Right now, the general approach is we're going to use one platform, which everyone's kind of aware of what it is. I mean, it's ubiquitous. As our internal identity management system, and then externally for the small businesses to interact with us, standardizing under one platform as well. So that's the biggest challenge that we're still working through. We got a really good handle on strategy. It's just all about follow through and execution. Now, over the next couple years, the biggest thing I would like to actually see is a single set of credentials that spans across the entire federal government. Right now, SBA has their own. I'm sure state has their own. DHS, I know for sure, has their own. But can we just bring it all together so that a PIV card is a PIV card is a PIV card no matter where you go? And your identity is managed at a much higher level rather than at the agency level. So I think that would probably be what I would root for and shoot for and always talk about anytime anyone brings up identity management to me.
Yeah. Rob?
Yeah, so I've got a couple, but I would really like to highlight James's comment about the single identifier. I absolutely would love to see that. We're all doing the same thing. We're all reinventing the wheel. We're all continually doing the same thing. Let's just leverage each other's identities. Culture has to change for that, right? And the culture has to change for the ZeroTrust as well, and how we're implementing security. So I would hope that changes, and we're able to take that more risk-based approach to security that doesn't exist today. It's very bigger, stronger, more robust pillars and walls, rather than bringing it back in more nimble ways of determining risk real time. I would love, and this was one of my comments to one of your other questions, that I would love to start getting some of that data back from DHS so that we can use that real time. We're doing that with industry, right? But being able to do that real time would be huge. I know how I'm being attacked. I provide that information to CISA, but I'd also like to know how James is being attacked. And if he's under a current attack, it'd be good to take that information in real time and slam that door before somebody starts turning their focus onto me. So I would absolutely love that. Yeah, I keep going, but I realize we're getting short on time.
And Ross, you're in the catbird seat for this one and get to see everybody's issues coming together. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you said 5 to 10 years out. We're looking at moving from a static risk-based control model, because everything is static, right? And you have these long-term periods where I trust this guy, to a dynamic risk model. And that means that you have to have the ability to read information from various sources. That information needs to be timely, and that doesn't always mean, at the moment, but it needs to be appropriate for the time of the decision you're making based on that information. And we need to come up with ways to trust that information, assurance on the information we're reading, particularly if we're going to share information across agencies. But that is a risk-based approach to access control, and I do believe that is our future. And putting the capabilities in place is going to be the charge that we all have to get to that risk-based adaptive access control approach. And that is essentially what ZeroTrust has. I'll say one of the challenges that we haven't yet addressed very much that we'll get to, and it's the reason data protection management was the fourth phase of CDM. Understanding the data that an agency has, and the data that is risky, either mission data or privacy data, it is still a challenge. Agencies don't have the intimate knowledge of data that they need to have in order to start answering those questions. And so there'll be tools that'll help with that, but agencies really need to start looking really closely at the data, the sensitive data, and look at it as, this data is different than this data over here, and I need to manage it differently.
Yeah. So actually that dovetails pretty nicely into a question that was launched in the Slack channel. Have there been challenges within your agencies related to privacy due to the identity data being persisted across the different CDM solution layers? Not really for anyone?
I've not heard of any.
Yeah, none.
Okay.
That type data wouldn't flow up into the tools.
Okay.
Yeah, I can just say, Matt, that what CDM has done is we've ensured that the agencies, the privacy information they have is part of a general, GSS already, and that the CDM program is, part of that GSS where they're doing that in most cases. I think that's how they're handling that, right? So it's all within the agency's control, and it's already in a system that is doing things like Active Directory and other things that are related to, to personally identifiable information anyway.
All right. I think they said the other video is 17 minutes, which gives us 7 or less, and I'm sure you all are backed up to other meetings. We had one more question come in from Tim Baldridge. The panel is describing a need for a trust framework. Can the panel share some thoughts on how at the federal enterprise level, this could be governed and assured?
I'm thinking that, sorry, Ross, you were talking? Maybe on mute.
No, I was just thinking, moving my lips,
Okay.
thinking about it, right?
All right, I'm gonna think out loud here. I really think that the way CISA is operating is positioning themselves to be that trust, quote unquote, governor for the federal government. I mean, all agencies, we follow the BODs, EDs, and so on and so forth. We talk to CISA. We have reporting requirements to CISA. I can't see why in a future state where our credentials are more or less derived from a system managed by CISA, or the governance model is led by CISA and therefore pushed down to the agencies so that we can trust each other equally. It's outside of no classifications where I know Rob may have no classified systems and SBA doesn't. At the same classification levels, I mean, we're all the same federal government. I don't see why we can't make that happen.
In the GSA PKI KIF program, I think is making a lot of strides in that as well, providing a single credential that's also protected and used by an individual agency. So adding to what James said, adding that piece to it would be huge as well.
And I think some of the modern authorization techniques can help with this trust propagation across agencies. And I think we'll see more of that as we move to the cloud, using modern authentication authorization techniques, be able to assert information about the individual. And I think that, that's just something that has to evolve. It doesn't exist currently, but I think we have some of the information. The 163.3 gives us a lot. And there's other probably identity attributes that could be shared. I'm not going to say that we've actually gone into that area looking at what those identity attributes are yet. Organization is obvious one, but I think CDM can be help with that as we need to be there.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, all right, with a few minutes left, what is, just for everybody here, I know a lot of the people that I'm looking on the attendee list are leaders in their respective agencies for identity and access management. So what is one final piece of advice that you can give the audience based on your experience in identity and access management on how they can be successful? It could be a point solution, it could be a big thing. Just interested in hearing. So we'll start with James again.
No worries. I'll probably say it's more of a philosophy. It's understand your requirements. I need to ensure that the identity is verified and trusted. And don't get too much stuck on the how you do that. Once you free yourself up from the how, you have a lot more option, the ability to innovate, the ability to do X, Y, and Z that might be cheaper, more effective, more efficient than the way that the how has been kind of forced upon you and you forgot the real requirement under it. So it's more or less free your mind to different possibilities and opportunities, innovate, but still meet that same baseline requirement.
Awesome. Rob?
Yeah, don't wait for anything. Just get going. Start reading the documents that are out there. There's a lot of great information out there. Just get somebody to start really digging into it and learning. I don't know if you want to take the same tactic that we did, and just seeing what requirements were out there and what we had in place and what was left over. But that seems like a pretty good way to do that gap analysis. And like James said, just find the needs and the areas that it could be used, and start changing and shifting your agency's culture to understand what this means for your agency, and just start going, because sooner or later you're going to be pushed into it, and it's not going to be the solution that you want. So if you get going now, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to anybody who's got specific questions, and anybody who's into this. That would be fantastic. I believe SBA was one of the people that we talked to when we started going down the line as well. I'm trying to remember the name of the individual that I spoke with. It may have been James's predecessor. But yeah, just get going. We've got new things coming up, and I can't believe that words like 5G has not been said yet, and other new technologies, that this is just going to become more and more important every day that we do this. So just get going. And everybody in the federal government is amazing at how much we want to help each other.
And I'll say, be curious. The world is changing quick. There's a lot to learn. Just when you just follow something that is interesting to you, because I guarantee you it's going to be a different world in 10 years, the way computing is done, than it is today. And it's the curious that'll be able to really go to where that's happening.
I love it. Yeah. I think the resounding: be curious, be agile, be open and enabler for your agency, right?
Yep.
Really look at identity and access management as an ability to enable your agency to do more things more securely and faster, right? So I think that's what I'm taking away from this today. So I think that gets us to the end of our time. I just want to say thank you, everybody on the panel, for participating today. I learned a ton. I think everyone in the audience learned a ton. Been extremely resourceful. Rob, I'll follow up with you and figure out where we can steal and share some of those documents that your team's dug so hard into. So again, thank you all. And I will turn it back over to the folks at the organizers. So thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.